Well, welcome to Vantage. And folks, I appreciate everybody that signed up. This is an incredibly important topic. And today we have guest speaker Steve Garish. I've known Steve for years. Steve has over 22 years of experience as a safety director, most recently at Walmart, and a JB Hunt before that, and a private fleet before that. And so, Steve, I am so glad to have you here today, sir.
Kelly, appreciate you having me, and I thank you for everybody for taking the time to get on our webinar today.
Absolutely, and folks, to give Steve extra time, Matt Lee has said, "Hey, Kelly, let's just leave the Ramsey Minute out this month because he's got a lot to talk about, and so we wanted to give Steve extra time." Also, I want to tell you, I've decided that 2019 will be the year of retention. So I'm going to focus all through 2019. 12 of these Impact Advantage webinars are all going to be focused on driver retention, unless, of course, there's some hot topic that comes up that we want to stick in there just so we can get it covered and keep everybody up to date. I will say I heard yesterday from HireRight that there are some changes coming down the pipe on the driver release and such that you have to have in the Consumer Reports. And so stand by for news on that, and we'll get that blasted out to everybody once we get it and go from there. So, hey, without further ado, let's, Steve, I'm going to go ahead and give you control and let you start your presentation.
Great, Kelly. Thank you very much, and my thanks to you and all the wonderful folks at Impact Solutions for your partnership and for inviting me onto the call today. As Kelly mentioned, I've known him for years. I spent 15 years with JB Hunt in operations, HR, and safety, and then was safety director at Walmart for 5 years from 2010 to 2015. Saw a lot of changes in my career, and I really applaud you for thinking about retention as a main focus for the coming year. A lot of times there's a lot of interest in the area of recruitment, but kind of like the old Crosby, Stills, and Nash song, if you can't have the one you want, love the one you're with. And I think the same is true for our drivers, taking the time to think about what truly retains. And it's well beyond pay. It goes into the treatment and the way you take care of your employees. It really does the trick in terms of retention. It's interesting, when I was at Walmart, I had been through many opportunities through the years to review thousands of accidents, been involved in collision and injury reviews at every level, from the minor scratch all the way up through fatality accident. But probably the most important and life-changing event that I was ever involved in while at Walmart was probably an accident that you have a lot of familiarity with in terms of the news. If you were paying attention back in June of 2014, there was a crash that happened on a Saturday morning very early that involved actor-comedian Tracy Morgan. And you probably remember hearing about that in the news. And when you were hearing about it, you were thinking, oh my gosh, I sure am glad I'm not that guy, the one that had to lead the effort in terms of the follow-up. Well, that was me, that you were glad you weren't. And I'm kind of glad you weren't me either. It was a bad day all the way around. It's interesting, the driver that was involved in that, of course, all of this is public because it was part of the NTSB's investigation and a published report that's online today. You'll read in there, is a fairly new driver, about a 90-day employee that had been hired. And of course, from a compliance standpoint, we had everything sewn up tight. ELD was good. We actually had an AOBRD that we were running at the time. So the electronic record of duty status was great. Compliance, DQ file looked good. Hiring process looked good. Maintenance records, all those things. But one of the key things that the NTSB investigates is the culture of a company when they come in to investigate. It's much more of a scholarly review than the FMCSA might give. They want to look at the core values of the company. Do they demonstrate commitment to safety? Does it start at the top with the leadership, or is it relegated just to the safety person to support safety? From a compliance standpoint, do they not just meet the minimum requirements? Do they actually go after excellence in terms of all the things that they have in place by way of policy and procedure. So what is the cultural feel of the company? And true to form, when they investigated this event, it occurred up in the New Jersey area at the Smyrna, Delaware facility. NTSB showed up for the investigation and actually went straight to the driver break room. And they spent the majority of their time there looking at what was posted on the walls, asking drivers questions about what they saw, how they were treated by Walmart, their commitment to safety. Hey, if you ever feel ill or fatigued, do they give you the ability to shut down for the day? How do they treat you in terms of your time off and the way you manage yourself? All these things really related well to a safety culture. And as you'll read in that NTSB report, you'll find that really the big call out was fatigue. This particular driver had stayed up, as it turns out, about 2 days prior to coming to work. He had been without sleeping. He had been on vacation with his family, drove from the Florida area up to Smyrna, Delaware, which if you look at a map, is a pretty far piece. Showed up to work late in the afternoon and said, I have 11 hours to drive. And he went to work, and in the 11th hour had the crash that was widely believed to be fatigue related. Fatigue really affects a lot of things, not just in terms of kind of the things you would think of, your motor skills, your ability to pay attention. It can affect your mood, your attitude. It has reverberations in the area of healthcare. A lot of the reasons that you see your drivers being disqualified oftentimes relate to poor care in the area of sleep management and sleep hygiene. And sometimes that relates to sleep dysfunctions like sleep apnea, which is an interesting topic for us to look at today. The outcomes, of course, are the accidents, are the injuries, but they're also impactful at home. I mean, you may not be able to be the type of person you would rather be when you're around your family if you're super tired. You may pop off at a customer or be late. It has impacts on your customer service and on your productivity. So overall, it's really the root cause of many issues that face you out on the road today. One of the things that NTSB called us out on was not having a strong fatigue management program. And you hear that term a lot today. What is a fatigue management program, right? What does it involve? A lot of times you think, well, I've got my ELD in place now, I'm all set, right? Well, no, there's really kind of three key areas that the North American Fatigue Management Program, which is actually a blueprint that the FMCSA, ATRI, and other North American industry and regulatory groups put together. This blueprint, they really talk about three key areas of fatigue management. Aside from the ELD, which is kind of the hours of service piece, you also have to think about how you schedule, how you plan loads for the day, the routes, etc., and then how you manage time off. And when I say that, you're thinking, gosh, how can I affect a driver's time off and how he or she manages what they do while they're off? Well, there's a lot of things you can do in that space that I think the Fatigue Management Program blueprint that FMCSA put out points out. So to give you a few examples, they really stress the importance of safety culture, that it comes from the top of the organization down through the ranks, where you give this idea of support for your drivers when they have needs. For example, I wrote a distracted driving policy while at Walmart, which is still in place today. When it was rolled out, I didn't get on a call and say, hey, this is, Senior Director Stephen Garish, Walmart. I was on there with the Senior Vice President of Transportation, Tracy Rosser, who's over the whole organization at Walmart. And he led the effort with my assistance to roll the policy out so that everyone was behind it, whether they were a, quote unquote safety person or operations person or any other person within the organization. Education and training is important. That distracted driving policy, it's interesting, we rolled that out and we included the spouses as part of our meetings. And it's interesting, when we talked about the policy at these meetings, we of course did it over a good meal, right? It's always good to have food involved when you're talking with your drivers. And when I sat down at a table, one of the drivers said, hey, Mr. Garish, I really don't like this distracted driving policy. It really hampers the amount of time that I have with my family. And, during the week I'm on the road and I need to be engaged with my family. Well, his wife, who had come with him that day, she said, well, first of all, she said, while you're working, you never call me. And she said, second of all, if you lose your good job talking to these guys on the phone while you're driving, I'm going to be really mad about it. And it kind of shut down the whole discussion in terms of the need for the policy, the importance of it. And it really kind of got through the minutia, if you will, of the argument down to the brass tacks of, hey, a lot of drivers spend time on the phone talking with other people other than their family. That needs to be addressed. So the involvement of the family in the education and training process, vital. You'd be surprised, your family members are your most important safety assets. They can bend the thinking of everyone that they are involved with, much more so than you can. Scheduling and tools, how you schedule drivers' time off. Do you factor in commute time to and from the house? Legally, you don't have to, but from a fatigue management standpoint, you really should think about it. And then the blueprint talks about sleep disorder screening and treatment, and kind of going beyond what normally happens with drivers when they're thrust into the ranks of insurance, and kind of doing it more yourself. You know, if you want something done right, doing it yourself, I think you've learned in your business that's the most important thing to think about. Why is that important in terms of sleep apnea testing and screening? Well, there's no more at-risk population of individuals than truck drivers when it comes to obstructive sleep apnea. It's about 28% of every fleet, according to the FMCSA, will be positive for the condition. What's kind of scary is most don't know that they have it. About 80% of the people that suffer from it are undiagnosed. And a lot of times drivers first find out about it when they're referred by the medical examiner for a test. And why is it important? Because, wow, during the night, obstructive sleep apnea basically is when you either stop breathing altogether for periods of time, or you have, restricted breathing. And sometimes that'll emanate as a snore or gasp for breath or just pauses in breathing. And what your body does, it raises your blood pressure to wake you up to take a breath. And this happens hundreds of times during the night. If you ever just Google sleep apnea videos, you'll find examples of this, and it's kind of scary. Most people that have it will wake up and not remember that they struggle like that throughout the night. And it has just huge effects on the overall physical well-being of the driver and his or her ability to pass the physical. So there's a lot of industry pressure in this space. And the reason why I think it made the topic list for Kelly and Impact Solutions is because it's showing up everywhere. FMCSA, along with the NTSB, are very concerned about it. NTSB actually, since 1990, has put out a list called their 10 Most Wanted list. And every year, consistently, going all the way back, they have had fatigue management at the top of their list. And it continues to be brought up post-crash. This latest crash involving a limo in New York with over 20 people killed. NTSB, when they announced their involvement in the investigation, mentioned the things they'd be checking for, and the fatigue management program is one of them. There were also some raised standards back in May of 2014. I was director of safety when this rolled out, and I saw right after this an immediate surge in the number of physicals coming back, where the driver who may have gotten that 1 or 2 year card got the 30, 60, 90-day card with some sort of test or more being prescribed as follow-up. And sleep was high on that list because that's a key part of the medical examiner requirement training. There's lots of studies, lots of high-profile cases like the one involving me at Walmart. And really what happens when the drivers are referred, the process is incredibly inefficient. I mean, you try to pick the phone up today and call for an appointment to get anything done, and it's very difficult. Imagine doing that as a driver. If you don't treat OSA, it has all sorts of negative outcomes, from crash risk, health issues, early retirements. Talk about retention. My turnover at Walmart in 2014 was only about 7%, which most people would just love to have. But most of that turnover was drivers who were forced to retire early for failing their medical exam. And so I think it's an important part of the retention process to retain and take care of your drivers from a health and well-being standpoint so that they'll be with you longer. Why take your chances with someone off the road when you know what you've got in your truck today? And being able to take better care of those folks, I think, is very important. When you think about what a lot of fleets are doing in this space, there's really a lot going on in terms of cultural training, messaging, reinforcement, and commitment that's happening, kind of this cultural change. I think you'll learn too, the new metrics for CSA are meant to give an idea of what the safety culture is for your company. And those will be some interesting things to look at once that data becomes public. From an HR standpoint, there's a lot of requirements that should be looked at in terms of your minimum hiring requirements, the radius in which you hire from. For example, we used to allow people to be hired from just about anywhere to work at a distribution center. After that crash, it was a 250-mile radius or smaller, and we factor in their commute time on their first day's dispatch. If it took them 3 hours to get in, you would subtract 3 hours from the 11-hour drive time day and give them a load that would meet that qualification. There's a lot of fleets who are now beginning to carve out and directly manage certain parts of their compliance programs. Sleep disorder testing and treatment is one of them. You can get it a whole lot cheaper on your own, manage it yourself, and have a lot better visibility on what you have than trusting the ranks of the insurance companies to do it for you. And then from an operations standpoint, there are changes in the way people look at their dispatch philosophy, their load planning, to factor in things like time off management and scheduling that go well beyond just the hours of service ELD requirements. When you think about the drivers out on the road today and what they face in terms of stuff that they run into by way of challenges on the road, they're thinking about all these different costs that they have. And, you know, when you think about trying to do something in the area of OSA yourself as a company, you think, well, gosh, I don't want to take on a new cost. Well, a lot of folks don't realize that you're paying for it at incredibly high rates today through your insurance. And so why not redirect some of those funds into a more directly managed program? No matter the size of the fleet, whether you're really big or really small, you know, there are fleets within Missouri here that we take care of, like ACT, for example, that have seen huge savings just by managing it themselves, including Walmart and J.B. Hunt, who are a couple of other customers who are much larger. And from a retention standpoint, families notice when you take care of their drivers, whatever the area, whether it's this or something else, they notice the way their driver's spouse is taken care of. And the more you can do in that retention area of providing care and removing hassles from your driver workforce, families notice and they encourage their spouses, particularly when they're having a bad day, to think about staying put and remaining with the company and working through the issue rather than leaving. The typical experience for someone through insurance looks kind of like this, where it takes them sometimes several weeks to get in after the CME refers them for a test, and they're paying a lot out of pocket all the way along the line, from the first visit to the sleep doctor to the in-lab test at a hospital. Some of those in-lab tests are $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and if they haven't met their deductible for the year, drivers are having to pull that out of their pocket. And trust me, if you got hit with a bill of that size, it would be hard for anybody, I think, to take on. Then you have to go in for a test, usually in a hospital, come back for another visit to have your results interpreted, and then you're placed on some sort of device, which without any kind of coaching or oversight, most people, about half the time, as a matter of fact, will stop using the device altogether, or they won't use it at the right level. The minimum level per night is 4 hours per night, 70% usage over the course of a year. So they'll show up to the CME for their renewal and be disqualified or be given another short card, which can really impact them as well as your operation. If you do it yourself, you can use home sleep tests, which are really nice. They're a fraction of the cost of an in-lab. And, you know, a doctor can allow them to be set up on one of those wherever they're at on the road near their home, wherever they happen to sleep that night. And then if they're positive for OSA, you can give them a device that wirelessly uploads their data every day. So we look at our patient data every day and provide coaching to drivers that may be struggling, provide compliance reports to the doctor, and the turnaround time is just a few days for stuff like this at a fraction of the cost of what you normally run into through traditional insurance programs. So it's well worth looking at. A few pieces of advice that I want to just share with you, and then Kelly and I are going to open up the call here in just a few minutes for some Q&A time. But a few pieces of advice.
Absolutely. If anybody has any questions, please go ahead and start sending those in, and Steve's doing a great job, man. So yeah, send your questions in, and we'll get those answered here. Hopefully, go ahead, Steve.
Kelly, thank you very much. Yeah, definitely give us those questions. So the few pieces of advice that I would give you, number one is take a minute to study that North American Fatigue Management Program site, NAFMP. Believe me, it gets brought up post crash when you're involved in a particularly high profile crash. It always comes up. You'll want to have good, clear answers there on your understanding and how you apply the principles to your operation. Definitely discuss with your leadership the need to look at this area. It's important. A lot of people just don't know it's a big issue, much like the organizations that I was a part of until you're involved in a major crash. It's a lot of times a compelling event like that forces an organization to look at something. And boy, isn't it nice and proactive when you can actually not have the compelling event to do something proactively ahead of time. It's important that your leadership get behind this effort, to take leadership in the area of taking care of your driver's fatigue, having a plan written out, which I'm always happy to help with, is important. And then those educational tools are huge. The involvement of the spouse, I'll just have to stress again, I never realized for most of my career the power and importance of the spouse as it relates to changing the mindset and helping the education process of your drivers. As much as you can involve them in particularly things that impact them, the better. Review all of your policies and procedures. Short story here, make sure your compliance is centralized. Everything you can is electronic, where you yourself can go out and change policies or pull out old ones and bring a new one out. Don't send printed stuff out to the field. It gets lost. Old copies get retained over new ones. Compliance is always best centralized, whereas safety is best decentralized. The more power you can give locally to your drivers and your staff, the better, with good, clear oversight. And make sure you look at your policies every year and put a fresh date and who reviewed them every year on the policy. And then lastly, take some time to carve out and create a managed OSA program. You save yourself a lot of time, money, and energy. And certainly we can help with that. And I think it's well worth it, given the impact that it has on the driving force today. So with that, Kelly, I'll thank you for having me on the call today, and thank you all for your time and allowing me to speak and visit with you. I think now may be a good time to take a few questions.
Absolutely. And, before we've got two questions there, and I just want to first also reiterate what you said. The family is paying attention. Folks, I was in 1990-ish, almost died in a hospital in Kansas City from severe esophagitis. And, my parents came up. I wasn't married. My parents came up, were at the hospital with me, running 104.3 degree temperature. They didn't know what was going on with me, and couldn't figure out what was causing all this. And my CFI truck was sitting right out there at the hotel where I parked it that Sunday before I got taken to the hospital, and nobody from CFI had called. Now, I want to tell you, I was sitting there in a state that I didn't care and didn't want to talk. But my mom was paying attention that her son, practically killing himself for the company, and nobody from that company thought enough to call. And it was, so she called the company to talk to Glenn Brown, the president. The call got taken by actually the guy that recruited me into trucking, Mitch Page. And anyway, a phone call happened to me, and I could tell you, conversation then happened in the hospital room about, well, I called because I don't think it's right. The family is watching. And, when I talk about driver retention, I talk about, find out about important dates, the birthdays, the anniversaries, important events that are coming up. And what if you sent a gift card on the anniversary? Once a year, a $50 gift card that says happy anniversary, wanted to buy you dinner. And of course, don't forget about your single drivers. You got to figure out how to roll them in there as well. But, whether it's on the birthday or a which, but, showing specific and genuine appreciation, involving the family is huge. Now, having said that, Steve, we've got two questions right now, and folks, please send in some more. How about owner-operators? How do you do this with those guys?
Yeah, great point. You have to be careful, right? You don't want to cross that employer-employee relationship sort of threshold, if you will. So a lot of companies that employ owner-operators will extend to the owner-operator the same kind of special pricing perhaps that they have gained. Like some of our clients, including the one that I mentioned right here in Kansas City, will say to those folks, hey, here's the discounted pricing through SleepSafe. If you want to pick it up, you can. In some cases, companies have actually extended the service to those employees, and they get paybacks from the settlement over a period of time. So like if they want to recoup all those dollars back from the owner operator, they offer them the ability to pay it back. But it's actually really easy to extend to them, just like you do your own employees. You just can't force them or direct them to use the plan. It's offered as an option, just like any other.
Gotcha. Next question, where can you get a self-administered test for sleep apnea?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting. The test itself is a prescribed item, just like a heart medication or cholesterol medication. So you actually have to go to a doctor to get a prescription written for a sleep test, whether you get one ordered online for home or not. The little test, the technology is awesome, but they're kind of pricey if you tried to buy one. So the best alternative I would recommend is going to a local sleep clinic and then asking them to administer a home sleep test. What they will usually do is try to default you to the in-lab hospital test so that they can make more money. And in my advice, I would tell you direct them to administer you a home sleep test instead. They have the devices at every clinic. They'll outfit you with it. You can actually drive home with it, sleep with it, and then come back the next day and they'll read the advice. So it's not something you can just order. It has to be something directed through prescription by a board certified sleep physician.
I've got to believe that's a lot cheaper. I did a sleep study at the hospital, and it was $5,000, years ago. And
yeah,
and I was a little put off that their mattress was so broke down. I said, for $5,000, you ought to have a new mattress.
Right, and trying like good luck getting sleep in a hospital room, right? Anytime you've had people stay, you're getting woke up all the time. And the same happens in an in-lab test. A home sleep test like what we have is about $900 comparative to a $5,000 at a hospital. And boy, they really rack it up on your insurance. You see it in the higher premiums you pay. And the companies we work with, they get rid of all of that claim through their benefits, and it really reduces their cost overall for the company. And plus, you just don't waste money, which is important in what we do.
Wow. Hey, Steve, I see on the screen, as seen on Discovery Channel and more at. What are those two video links that I'm seeing there?
Yeah, it's kind of cool. What we do is fairly innovative. We've been at it for 11 years, but we got approached by the Discovery Channel last year and put on one of their innovations programs. And so you can actually look at that actual segment at that Vimeo tag there. And then we created just a short little 2-minute kind of summary of what we do at SleepSafe at that second tag there. It's kind of one of those whiteboard type videos like you've seen UPS and others do, where it looks like someone's writing on a whiteboard, and it describes what we do. So later on, if you're a little more interested in our company, you can certainly check out both of those tags.
Absolutely. I'm going to talk to you about that. I'm going to watch those. All of these Impact Advantage, I think everybody on the call knows this, the Impact Advantage webinars are listed on my website, but we also put them into the library of Impact eLearning so that all of our clients there can actually assign them to their drivers and have record that they watched it and then understood it from the testing. I'm going to look at those videos and talk with you. Maybe that makes sense for me to link those into Impact eLearning as well. So in looking for another question, if somebody has them, Steve, I use a thing called Z-Quiet, and I was not diagnosed. I do not have sleep apnea, but I do know that I was snoring. And so there's a mouthpiece, you put it in, keeps your lower jaw forward. And I notice when I have that in, I sleep a whole lot more soundly. What do you think about those devices?
Yeah, they really work well for people who have mild apnea or who generally just suffer from snoring. One of my sisters, who would be mortified, by the way, if she knew I was mentioning her, one of my sisters, negative for sleep apnea, however, she snores like a freight train. She uses the mouth guards to kind of jut the jaw out, as you mentioned. And those are effective for mild cases or people that have issues with snoring. For truck drivers who are beholden to, the driver fitness for duty requirements in their exam, the mouth guards don't work there because they don't generate data where the doctor can actually see whether they're using the device or not. So that's still the gold standard for a regulated person would still be the CPAP device, but certainly for people like you and I who don't have to have physicals as part of their job, they certainly help. You know, the Breathe Right strips are also effective too. My wife actually uses one of those, and it helps her and me because we don't hear her snoring.
There you go. Hey, before we, in closing remarks, I just want to mention something real quick. The ATA Safety and Human Resource Council Convention is coming up November 12th through the 14th in Long Beach. Folks, to be a member of the Safety Management Council is like $350 a year. You don't have to be a member of the main ATA. I know a lot of fleets aren't because, man, it's just so expensive. We can't afford it. But folks, the Brian Lagana is executive director there at the Safety Management Council, and he is doing a phenomenal job. And there is a safety leg of the Safety Management Council Convention. Of course, the safety, I'm saying it wrong, Safety Management / Human Resource Council Convention, and it's actually longer than that. But there's a safety leg and there's a human resource leg. The content that is happening, go out to trucking.org, click on events, look at the agenda that's happening out in Long Beach. It is absolutely over the top and just getting better and better every year. So I'd certainly invite and hope to see some folks there at the convention. It's growing every year. I will be there. And so I just wanted to mention this. Coming up November 12th and 14th, it is absolutely leaders in the industry are part of that council. And actually, you guys, I think, know that I'm the chairman, probably outgoing chairman, of the Recruiting, Retention, and Driver Wellness Committee. With that, Steve, thank you so much. We got some people starting to fall off because we're over time. And with that, thank you so much, sir, and we'll probably have you back again. You were a phenomenal presenter. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you all very much. Be careful.